Oh my god!
Now, if you're new around here, this channel pretty much got its starting because of my little street truck called Goldie Hawn, and it got a surprising amount of attention for what it was. It was a $1,200 truck that I just put some time into. Now, like I said, I got rid of that truck, I think about 10 months ago now, but I still get a ton of people DMing me on Instagram. If you don't follow me, Snydertron3000, I try to get back to everybody that sends me a message. I still get a ton of people that send me messages asking me about this or about that, or what supercharger I had on the truck, what turbo kit I had on the truck, things like that. So I figured we would just try to make a video kind of addressing pretty much everything, and from my experience, what I think are, in this case, the 10 best mods you can do to your truck. Now, these are in no particular order, I just wrote them down as I thought of them, but I think they're all kind of, whenever you're building a truck, you should have all of them in mind so that you don't have like conflicting things. You don't want an 1800 stall converter with a hog ass cam, you know what I mean? So it's kind of important to think of all those things when you're putting any vehicle together, but in this case, trucks. So obviously, when thinking of a fun little street truck build, the first mod that came to mind is a camshaft swap. The stock cams in these engines are pretty small. Like from the factory, if you engine dyno them, they're gonna make mid 300s horsepower, which is pretty good compared to their older Gen 1 and Gen 2 counterparts, but it is still a pretty small camshaft. You can pick up a significant amount of horsepower from just changing the camshaft, and you'll need a tune, of course. But just changing the camshaft. What one you'll want to go with really depends on your goals. If you want it super radical, go with like a BTR stage 69 or whatever. For something that you're going to spend most of your time driving, maybe beating on a little bit here and there, doing some burnouts, going to the drag strip, things like that, I'd say most stage 2 or 3 cams are going to meet your goals. For those of you who are familiar with Goldie Hawn, for a long time I ran the Texas Speed Stage 2 truck cam, the low lift. It was 216, 220, 550, 550, 112 LSA. And that was a great all-purpose cam. Tons of torque down low, felt really good up high. Zero complaints about that cam. I wish I still had it. The BTR cams, really good. The BTR no springs cams seem to make pretty decent power for not having to change the springs. A lot of people really like the sloppy stage 2 or the Elgin cams. With most of them, you are going to have to change the springs, something to think about. But like I said, the very first thing I thought about when modifying a truck to be like a fun street truck was cam swap. The second thing I thought about as far as being an NA truck is, now that you've got the cam, it's wanting a lot more air to move through the engine. You're going to want to free up a lot more air to get sucked into the engine. So number 2, cold air intake. Now, generally speaking, I got a feeling that most of the people who are going to watch this video are going to have like the NBS or GMT 800 style trucks. This is true for the OBS trucks, and I'm sure some of the later like NNBS trucks, but these stock intakes are fairly restrictive. I mean, they're good for what they are. I do like that they have a huge filter, but if you just upgrade the filter and switch to a more free-flowing intake tube, that will do the job just fine. You don't need to spend $300, $350 on like a Volant cold air intake or anything like that. But I do really like the Volant kit where it comes down below the bumper and sucks in a bunch of fresh air down there. I do really like that one. But you're definitely going to want to do something to free up a little bit more airflow, and no, that does not mean just take the filter right out of it. Because all that's going to do is just destroy your MAF and get a bunch of gunk in your engine. Don't do that. That's a no-no. Like I said, I would recommend for just budget-minded, I mean, if you've got the money to spend, go ahead. Spend $400 on like a K&N or Volant or whoever. But what I would do, and what I'll probably do to this truck, is just upgrade to a better filter and just get a better flowing intake tube. Because these, if you've ever seen like an older LT1 car, like a Roadmaster or a Camaro or anything, I don't know if it was the same on the Camaros, it probably was, but like right on top of the engine they had this huge pancake looking reservoir. And what people would often do is take that out, and a hockey puck would fit right in there and they would seal it up. If nothing else, it made it sound a whole lot better. You could actually hear the intake noises, which is cool. And speaking of intake noises, that'll lead us to number 3, which is upgrading the intake manifold. Now, something that a lot of people choose to ignore is that the stock truck intakes make pretty darn good power. They have really long runners. A lot of people think that the LS1 intakes make more power. They don't. So why would you upgrade that? Because you can still get better than that. So here is what the stock truck intake manifolds look like. Pretty hideous, yeah. But like I said, they make good power. But a good upgrade from that, at least if you want to stick with a factory intake, is a TBSS or NNBS intake, the bread box intake. Now, I don't have one of those laying around, so I can't show you, but you can Google it, see what they look like. Generally, you can find them fairly cheap used, like 100 to 200 bucks. Or if you're wanting to get real saucy with it, you could always upgrade to a sheet metal fabricated style intake. Or what a lot of people have been running lately is like a Holley intake, the high ram, which I think would fit on the trucks. But something to think about is the Holley high ram, where the throttle body bolts to it is on an angle down. So something you'll have to keep your eye out for. Also, something worth noting, the bread box intake, the TBSS one, that's a 4-bolt intake. So you'll either need a new throttle body or get an adapter for it. Alright, so now that you've got that much more airflow going into the engine, you'll want to free up some going out. So the next one, number 4, is headers and exhaust system. Again, this is assuming that you're not going to turbo the truck or anything like that. But my personal favorite exhaust system for these trucks, and most LS swap vehicles now, is from Speed Engineering. You can see, I actually got some right there. And when I was first putting together Goldie Hawn, I used their True Dual X-Pipe kit. It sounded great, I think. It's 3-inch stainless, TIG welded really nice. A lot of people didn't like the clamps. That's fair. I didn't actually have a problem with them, but a lot of people seem to complain about them. And I've used their headers on a few different vehicles. They always fit really well, and they're pretty cheap, like 300 bucks a set for polished stainless. I don't think you can really go wrong with that. So headers, particularly long tubes, if you, whatever you're working on, in this case not a truck, if you can't fit the long tubes, generally the LS manifolds flow really well. I haven't seen a video comparing the stock manifolds to like a shorty header, so I don't know how they stack up. I do know that the long tubes make a lot more power, like 15 to 20 horsepower sometimes. Whenever I can, I try to fit long tubes on the vehicle. When it comes to shorties, especially on an LS, because their stock manifolds flow so well, I don't think it's really worth it unless you strictly want the looks. So long tube headers into probably some sort of nice Y pipe. I know a lot of people do like the True Duals. A good muffler to help the sound. You want to show off that new cam you just put in. And some good exhaust the rest of the way back. So while we're at the back of the truck, you put a cam in the engine. You've got a lot more air going in and out of it. You're making a lot more power. You do have it tuned. Don't forget to get it tuned. These trucks are heavy. Like even my single cab short bed 2-wheel drive was like 4,300 pounds. So you're going to want to help it out as much as you can. So the next thing, number 5, is rear gears. Typically from the factory, these trucks are either open diff, which you want to get rid of. The ones that are posi have the G80 or the Grenady. You don't want that. They're pretty weak. Yukon makes a pretty good locker for not a lot of money. There's a lot of different options. For a truck like this extended cab's probably getting close to 5,000 pounds, give or take. I'd say 410s would be a good choice. It'll really help it get up there. These overdrive transmissions on the highway, it'll still be fine, especially trucks have real tall tires, so it's not gonna affect the drivability hardly at all. I had 410s and 373s in my truck. The 410s were great. Once I started making a little bit more power, I dropped down to 373s to try to mile an hour a little bit more. I think especially for an NA street truck, 410s are a great choice. Depending on what you're trying to do, 373s might be a good idea, but it's all up to your specific setup. There's not like a set recipe unless you're strictly copying someone's exact build. I know a lot of people are worried about the drivability with 410s. I wouldn't worry about that in the slightest. These trucks have overdrive transmissions, they're fuel injected, they're super efficient. My truck in particular, when I had the 410s, it was a 30-inch tall tire. I had the 4L80, and cruising on the highway about 70 miles an hour was about 2,400 RPM. I wouldn't worry about that in the slightest. So I think the next thing we should talk about goes pretty closely with the rear gears, and that is a torque converter. Especially if you've put a pretty good sized cam in it, you'll want a looser torque converter so that it doesn't surge at idle and try and do a bunch of weird stuff. Plus, if you're trying to get more performance out of the truck, A looser converter will help it get up into the power a little bit quicker, a little bit easier, and it'll get on the tire more. So I definitely think a torque converter is something to consider. I mean, at the bare minimum, the Texas Speed Stage 2 cam recommends, I think, like a 25 or 3,000 stall. Now, I will say, my truck, I drove it around for a long time without swapping the converter. It's doable. Sure, you have to push the brakes a little bit harder at stops, but it's doable. I would say I don't recommend it. If you can, put a good torque converter in it, put something the correct size. Like if you're going to daily drive the truck every day, don't put a 4500 stall in it. It'll just create a bunch of heat and it'll be really tough on things. But that being said, don't be afraid of a 3000 stall on a daily driver, because these are lockup transmissions unless you go to like a 400 or something. So if you're not familiar what a lockup transmission is, or in this case a lockup converter, once you get into high gear and you're just cruising, it will lock the converter up so it's not slipping. So don't be afraid of like a 3000 stall or something like that if that's the best for your situation. So I think that was number 6. So number 7, we're gonna go with wheels and tires. Wheels and tires are the biggest thing, I think, that changes the character of a vehicle. If this truck had Steelies on it, and you know, ignore that part, but if this truck had Steelies on it, it would look drastically different than it does with the 20s on it. And that goes for tires too. Tires with an aggressive tread pattern can really change the look of even something with Steelies. So like I said, all of these they're all interconnected to some degree. So if you have a truck that you want to spend more time at the drag strip, you don't want 24s on it with real thin sidewall and real shitty tread. And conversely to that, if you're going to build a truck that you want to do like a little bit more pro touring with, you don't really want to cruise around on a drag pack all the time. But wheels and tires are probably the biggest thing that changes the character of the truck. But the thing that changes the attitude of the truck the most is definitely the altitude. So me personally, I like to lower my vehicles. I know a lot of people think that lowering a truck absolutely ruins it. I think that, you know, you guys can kick rocks, but I would say whether you're lowering it or lifting it, suspension is the thing that changes the attitude of the truck the most. Wheels change the character the most. Altitude changes the attitude. So like I said, I prefer to lower my vehicles. That's a pretty broad statement. I have owned some lifted Jeeps on 35s, but I think just generally I spend most of my time on tarmac, so I like vehicles that work better for street or track. So the next thing, to go back to performance, this is more of like a helper mod, and that would be switching to electric fans. Generally, I prefer a mechanical fan because it's just one less component to go wrong. I mean, even if the bearing in that clutch fan seizes up, you're still gonna have airflow because it's gonna keep spinning. But with that said, the clutch fan does take up a ton of space here. Like the radiator is under this, so this is all fan here. So switching to an electric fan will free up so much space for something that we're going to talk about next. But if you've got a truck with the bigger radiator, I don't remember what size it is, I think 32 or 34, something like that, you can upgrade to like an HD 2500 or whatever electric fan. This will bolt right in. It is designed to work with that radiator. You'll have to do a little bit of wiring, but that's not too big of a deal. You could just wire it up to a toggle switch if you want, or some wire off the fuse box to just as soon as the key is on, it's on. But I do know that I think it's Nelson makes a little harness that will plug right in. You have to go to 2 separate pins on the ECU and then get it tuned so it will come on with whatever temperature you want it set at. Like I said, I prefer a clutch fan because it's one less thing to go wrong. The biggest reason to go to an electric fan on these is to free up space. And the thing you would free up the space for is for intercooler piping when you go power adder, which is the next thing. Now, I'm just saying power adder as a big blanket statement for the big 3 turbo nitrous supercharger. Obviously, if you go nitrous, you're not gonna have to free up that space, but I mean, generally, most of you are gonna want to go electric, just if nothing else for the looks and to free up the 5 extra horsepower, even though clutch fans take like almost nothing to spin. If you have already put the cold air intake and the headers and the full exhaust system, things like that on the truck. Maybe you'll want to go supercharger or nitrous so that you don't have to undo all of that work to go turbo. But turbos are considered, and I would tend to agree with this, one of the better power adders, because it is taking all of that exhaust that's wasted otherwise, aside to make some cool noises, to spin the turbo to make more power. Superchargers are parasitic. They're crank driven, so it takes a little bit of power to spin it, and in turn it makes more power. Nitrous, that's just like rock and chisel. You know, any caveman can figure that shit out. Put a nozzle here, hit a button, go fast juice. Turbos and superchargers, they're going to take a little bit more effort. There are direct bolt-ons. I think the easiest one is going to be supercharger. I mean, of all the three, the easiest is going to be nitrous, I think. But as far as boost goes, the easiest is going to be supercharger. That is directly bolt-on. You don't have to run any oil lines, anything like that. And a lot of those kits will come with injectors, and depending on where you get them from, they'll send you a tune for everything. Turbo is going to be a little bit more involved. You're going to have to change up the exhaust system, put new manifolds on it to run to a turbo, do the whole intercooler deal. But don't let that scare you away. I think turbos are great. They make a ton of power. I mean, so do all of them. I mean, if you haven't noticed, let's see, turbo car, turbo, the truck was turbo, the Firebird was turbo. I tend to prefer turbos. I do like centrifugals though. So I don't know if this actually will, but hopefully this video helps somebody. I tried to pretty much cover all of the things that I think are the most important. So that's probably gonna do it for this video. Hopefully this video helps somebody kind of direct their focus into a specific area. I tried to cover everything that I thought was the most significant mods for your truck, or really any vehicle. Most of this stuff applies to pretty much any internal combustion engine. But like I said, today we were specifically talking about trucks. So don't forget to hit that bell. A lot of people have been telling me that they haven't been getting the notifications, so don't forget to do that. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. We'll see you next time.